phase of our operation in light is to be able to manifest. Because light is that which makes manifest. It is possible that on account of the infiltration that have entered the cosmos, we can be contaminated. It's possible that the light in a man can become darkness. So we said our first attempt at dealing with light is to be able to absorb enough to manifest the same. It's like the operation of the moon in its interaction with the sun. Our crisis is not the absence of light. It's whether we can interact sufficiently with light that is available to us and to manifest the same. If a believer and his life does not become a testimony of what he represents, then there is a crisis, an identity crisis in the realms of the spirit. Because our design necessitates that we must bear light. Because we were created in his image and in his likeness. So every time we lack that ability to give expression to light, there is an identity crisis in the spirit. In fact, in Ephesians chapter 3 verse 10, he said that we were expected to manifest God so much that even the principalities and powers will draw lessons by looking at us. Because the depths and the advantages that God has given to us was not available in the spirit realm. In the civilizations of the realm, access, the level of access that we have was not granted to the angelic realm. He said, to which of the angels did he say to at any time, thou art my beloved son, this day have I begotten thee. So the relationship of the angelic with God was based on well-defined legalities that govern their operation. But when our time came, when our civilization was born, God gave us so much access to intimacy that it was a relationship between a father and a son. And the least thing a son should do is to manifest the likeness of his father. And that's why when our design was completed, he said we should bear his image and his likeness. You didn't do anything to look like your father. You didn't do anything to look like your mother. The birth process itself necessitates it. So everyone born after the order of light is naturally a light bearer and should be illuminating his word. And Jesus speaking in John chapter 9 verse 5, it says, so long as I'm in the world, I am the light of the world. But a point came when Jesus had to leave the world. And when Jesus was leaving, he knew there was no challenge at all. Because he said, you are the light of the world. A city set upon a hill that cannot be hid. The reason is because on account of your birth, you derive from my nature. So everything I was in the world, you become. And this is what the Christians in Antioch epitomized so much. And when they looked at them, they said, these ones are little Christ. And they called them Christians. They were effulgences of the dimensions of God. And I said, as you grow in light, a point come where you migrate from just manifesting light. You become a judge in the spirit. So what you do is that you separate light from darkness. It's one thing to manifest, but darkness will still attempt to hold sway. But when we grow up, what we do is that we give boundaries to darkness. And that was what God did. He said, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was void and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the waters. Now, God was moving, but darkness was still upon the deep. Now, God is light. 1 John chapter 1 verse 5. But light was moving, yet darkness was upon the face of the deep. Because it's one thing to shine. It's another thing to tell darkness its boundaries. So you can be a believer in your family shining, yet the devil will rule. People will die. things will go wrong because you have not been awakened to the responsibility of dividing between light and darkness. So it's not enough to shine. It becomes enough when you develop the capacity to tell darkness, stop here, and let light have expression. That's the office of the judge. You know, Peter was walking with Jesus, and he said, in a moment, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. That's light. And Jesus said, flesh and blood have not revealed this to you, but my Father which is in heaven have revealed this to you. He, from the frequencies of Zion, he entered into light and he attracted and reflected it. But the next moment, Peter drew Jesus to the side and Peter began to transmit from darkness. So Peter could shine, but Peter could not divide between light and darkness. At one point, he burned with illumination. At another point, he was darkened like the devil himself. A prophet Ayo Jejeda told us that you come into sonship when you can divide between light and darkness. So even though Peter was shining, he was a babe. And the devil knows. You know, Adam was walking in the garden and glowing like the sun. And he came, he said, you are lion, you are tiger, you are crocodile. He was just manifesting until darkness showed up and said, did God really say you should not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? And the guy became confused because he could manifest, but he didn't have capacity to divide. And until you can divide, you are not entitled to an inheritance, because anything God gives you can be lost. That's why many great anointings are lost. That's why many great heritages are lost, because men don't grow to places of dividing. So the guy can have all the influence, he can have the fame, he can have the power, he can have the glory, he can have the platform. If he cannot divide, the devil will come with assurance. In fact, most times he waits for you to rise. That's why Paul said, do not exhort a novice, because when he's lifted up, he will be lifted up in pride, and the devil will strike him. He will fall into the condemnation of the devil because he can't divide. So our burden in the morning was to show us how to divide between light and darkness, so that you can keep the testimony of God and hand it over to another generation. Paul kept it so much. He said, I have run my race. I have finished my course. There remaineth for me. He knew. And he didn't just know his assignment. He knew his reward. There remaineth for me a crown of life. And he said to Timothy, the things that I have given to you, commit the same to faithful men who shall be able to teach others. So he carried it as an inheritance and he handed it over to another generation. It's a business in the spirit. And I said the way we come into that realm is to walk in the light as he is in the light. Walk in the light as it is in the light. And I said the first way to walk in the light is to accept and acknowledge everything God says you are. If you don't accept and acknowledge it, you can never walk in it. The reason many people are in sin today is because they never knew it was possible to walk in holiness. They taught them, and it became part of their consciousness that it's impossible to live above sin. So when you say this man is holy, somewhere in their heart they are saying, once in a while he does some things. When you tell them nothing is impossible, somewhere in their heart they remember a circumstance that was not handled. And they say, my brother, forget you. In this world, is little by little. When you tell them you have authority over devils, they tell you wisdom is profitable to direct. So when time comes to journey to the village, they say, we will know they go village. Unconsciously, it has been built into their minds that they are not what God says they are. So the guy falls. He rises, he cries to God. He falls again, he rises, he cries to God. So he now thinks that it is normal to live in sin. Even if you try, you can never live above sin, because it's not a reality in your spirit. So Paul said we should be renewed in the spirit of our minds. And the way to do it is to lay hold on everything God says you are. When God showed you this vision, sir, there was nothing that suggested it will happen. But you came and you kept saying it. And you kept saying it until the buildings rose. Until the men came, and today it's a system. That's the same way we build our lives. Nobody became big just by appearing there. God told them, they took it and they believed it. And most times, if you look back at the pictures of the men making impact today and see them when they started, laugh, because they don't look like it. But they kept talking what God said. They kept prophesying what God said. They kept acknowledging, accepting, and conforming to it. And a point came where that utterance came from. The life began to power it. The power began to power it. The abilities of the Spirit that brought that utterance began to give support to it. And one became two, two became three, until it became a nation. The Lord will tell you, you are his righteousness. But when he told you that, you were a fornicator, you were a killer, you were a liar. But he said that the communication of your faith becomes effectual by the acknowledging of every good thing that is in you. God tells you, you are an apostle to the nations. And the last time you checked, nobody in your lineage, you are the first person that spoke in tongue in your family. And it looks as if, how it won't happen. But he came and saw you in your crude state. He said you are an apostle to the nations. You didn't even dare to believe until God quickens you and you begin to affirm it. You begin to affirm it. And after a while, you look back 5 years later, you discover you are no more where you used to be. And after 7 years, somebody said, come and minister in my church. After 10 years, all of a sudden, that which looked as if would never happen became your natural state. Because you accepted it, you acknowledged it, and you began to live it. It applies in every sphere of life. And I said, when these things begin to happen, what happens is that the realm comes with its laws. Every dimension we call forth, it comes with a requisite consecration. Because what sustains the realm is the consecration it stands upon. I went for a meeting and Randy Clark ministered to me. He said, go and walk in the glory realm. And I went to him. In 2 weeks, everybody I prayed for was healed. And I said, I've entered something. And instead of aligning to the suggestions of the Spirit and the movements in my soul, when those dimensions began to happen, I started telling everybody, oh boy, nothing is impossible. So I was confessing, but I negated the consecration requirement that came with the realm. And after 2 weeks, the realm began to vaporize. And it lifted from my head. That's why Paul said to Timothy, the things you have received from me, the same. The same. No, he said, this charge give I thee, Timothy, my son, that you fan to flame the gift of God that was imparted, that was bequeathed you by the laying on of hands of the presbytery. The realm will come, but sustaining the realm is a function of the law of life that realm brings. Many never align to that law, so they receive every day, but the same way they receive, they lose. Even when Jesus heals people, he said, go and sin no more. Because that realm of divine health is sustained by righteousness. If you go back to sin, this healing will not make for the next one. To walk in divine health, there is a law of righteousness that must be kept. To receive healing can be on a platter, but to walk in divine health, it carries a law. There's a consecration requirement. Many believers that should have been mighty tasted terrible dimensions in God, but could not sustain it. And after a while, it vaporizes. And they are wondering what happened. They violated the Holy Ghost when he was giving them commands in their spirits. Because every dimension comes with a consecration requirement. The reason you see people talk and experiences is like a caricature is because they know what to say, but they refuse to align with the consecration requirement. If there is a distortion between your utterance and what the Spirit is brewed on your inside, there will be no manifestation. This is where the work of the Spirit begins from. The ability to harmonize what is said with the consecration requirement that that realm you provoke brings. But many have a distortion. So it looks as if Christianity is a mockery, but it's not true. It is worked. Having said that, that's a recap for those who were not here in the morning. So if you don't accept what God says you are, or who God says you are, and you don't confess it publicly, affirm it, acknowledge it, you will never become. And even if you acknowledge it and the realm begins to come, because your acknowledgement is like summoning the realm. You are provoking the fountains of the great deep. And when it begins to come, it comes with its laws, because there is an atmosphere where that realm exists. So that atmosphere will be superimposed on your heart. If you don't align with the government of that atmosphere, the realm will withdraw. So many people can go and fast for 40 days and provoke a dimension. And when the dimension comes, they can't preserve it for 3 days. So 40 days spiritual enterprise wasted in 3 days. And after a long time, their life is in cycles. So they attain the title of prayer warriors. And then their pride and bargain becomes, I am a man of prayer. I am a man of prayer. Bishop Oedekbo said, what a man of prayer can do in 3 weeks, a man of faith can do in a moment. You know what? The man of prayer only prays, but the man of faith knows the laws that brings to pass. So he commits himself to it. Is there anything wrong with praying? No, that's what summons the realm. But when the realm comes, what do you do with it? It diffuses in a second. Jesus went to summon a realm for 40 days in praying and fasting. And the moment he began what he was doing, there was a movement in the spirit. And the princes began to check. And they realized another son is about to emerge. We saw when Abraham rose. We saw when Samson rose. What we are seeing now, the distortion in the atmosphere, is a suggestion that somebody is beginning to touch the gates of certain portals. And they began to search. And when they searched, they found him in the wilderness. And instantly they brought the test of the realm to him immediately. And he wasn't tested at the end of the fast. He was tested for 40 days and 40 nights. So they kept buffeting him. They kept buffeting him. But he wouldn't break. And when he came back, the Bible said he returned in the power of the Spirit. He kept it. And when he wanted to send his people out, he said, the prince of this world cometh to me and findeth nothing. The reason I sustained it is because I kept the demands of the realm. He said, for their sakes I sanctify myself, that they too might be sanctified. I kept the demands of the realm. Most of us here are mighty men. Mighty. We know we are far from where we should be. But our problem is our inconsistency in attaining to the demands of the realm that our destiny summons. The destiny of the man summons a dimension that should command the attention of his generation, but he doesn't have the culture to sustain it. He wakes up in the morning and the Holy Ghost wakes him up with a song. And as he wakes up, he discards that song and goes online to see how many likes he had from the post he posted yesterday. He jumps to eat. The Holy Ghost restrains his appetite. It's as if he put that food in his mouth, it's a sin. He check. After 30 minutes, he struggled. That you are struggling immediately is a suggestion that there's a movement in your spirit. So instead of aligning to that movement, after 30 minutes, oh boy, only the living serve the Lord. And then only the living serve the Lord. And he remains on that mountain for 20 years. And when people begin to rise, they say, but I mentored that young man. I taught him the ways of God. The ways of God. When he sees the people he trains show up and they are making impact, he now sit down as a senior person and he acts as if he's busy. So that they will greet him first. Let people know that he's their senior. And he lives with momentary gratification when he should be answering the cry of his generation. And the problem is that the Spirit of God will not strive with man forever. So while the man violates the protocol of the realm, God begins to look for another man. God begins to look for another man. He thinks he's so special. Until the time he says he's ready, they now tell him they have anointed another David. So the house of Saul becomes weaker and weaker. The house of David becomes stronger and stronger because he attends to the demands of the realm. Sons of light. They are those who walk in the light and keeps the demands of light. He says, have respect unto the covenant, for the dark places of the earth are the habitations of cruelty. If you don't have regard for the covenant, you'll be swallowed up by the thick darkness. Kadosh, Kadosh, you are mighty on your throne. The easiest thing to do is to stir people. The easiest thing to do is to impart people. But it takes a lifetime of commitment to sustain it. Wise men can carry the weight of an impartation until they come to the landmark of the next impartation. So they receive it, carry it jealously until they come to another place and something else comes from them. David was anointed 3 times. He kept all of it until he became king over Israel. He didn't lose the anointing of the kingship over Judah. He carried it by that consecration until he came to a point where the 3rd impartation came. But many people, even when he was anointed before his family, they will lose that one. So every time they receive something fresh and they never become anything. The laws of the realm are rigid. They are rigid. You can be a Deborah, but whether you manifest to your generation as a Deborah is a function of how much you keep the laws of that office. So there are many of you here that God is bringing a demand. What you need now is not a prophetic confirmation. You already know who you are. But the energy to bring forth is lacking. There are some that God begins to tell, start a chain prayer, start a chain prayer. And that wind will trouble them for 6 months. They won't respond until the wind will lift. They will now find a group of people and say, let's go for 3 days retreat. Let's go for 3 days. And they do 3 days retreat. And then they come back and say, we have touched something. We have touched something. Better move when God is helping you. You can't carry your weight. If there's no energy in your body, that's when you know your leg is very heavy. You don't know how heavy this hand is. It's because you are being sufficed from within. That's why you can swing your hand. If the energy is, have you been before and you attempt to carry yourself, that's when you discover you are very heavy. Better move when God is carrying you. Because when that law comes, there's a grace supplied to make you walk in it. Let's stop this abortion of spiritual atmospheres, abortions of spiritual impartations, abortion of graces that are released on us. We go from revival meetings to revival meetings, from men of God to men of God, yet there doesn't seem to be a change. So we are looking for new sensation, new sensation, new sensation. We become men of sensations. But the wise men of old, they carried with them words. They watched them, they guarded them, and their lives became as rigid as those laws. I came in from Ibadan yesterday. One of the old men that we were going to see before I had to travel and a lot of things. men that walked with God from the days of Babalola. Is one of his only existing descendants. There are about 2 of them living now. Direct descendants. The same culture they learned from the man, they are still practicing till today. 6 a.m. the man, Babalola, wakes up, rings the bell, and they pray. 9 a.m. rings the bell. 12 rings the bell. 3 p.m. rings the bell. 6 p.m. ring the bell. So if you visit, you may say, okay, this week they are doing retreat. Then you'll be there for 1 month, and the man keeps, unless it's not at home. And then you come and say, I received the mantle of Babalola. Can you keep the consecration? That's why it's a joke. It's a joke. Every time we talk about it, it's a joke. And these men, they carry that culture till today. These men just keep the gate. They won't go. We are okay. We will. He was one of them was in the car moving, and a mad woman stood in front of the car, and they were horning, trying to drag her and say, leave her. He went down and did the mad woman, and the mad woman came. He shook her. She fell down. When she stood up, she was cleansed. You now say, oh boy, this dimension, no be small. He was crossing the road, and cars were passing. They didn't want to stop. He now did like this, and the car stopped. When they passed, the man on the car, the engine had knocked, because he did like this. They on the car, they struggled for more than 2 hours. What happened? Say the Baba passed and did like this. They say, you should have known now. They now went to the Baba. You on your car to the right. He said, tell him to turn it to the left. How will they ignition? How will the ignition turn to the left? The car was designed to turn to the right, but they weren't talking. Even iron obey him. And the guy turned the car to the left, and the car picked. Because somebody said, you think, okay, wait, let me pass. As he did like this, it's not only the driver that heard, even the engine heard. And then you say, hey, this dimension, live with him for 3 days. There's a young man in Ibadan today. He starts his service 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. If you like, be 1,000. All of you will line up. The guy was ministering. Somebody fell. His head broke. He commanded the blood. The blood gathered back and entered the head. And the guy stood up. How did he enter? The mom told him, go and live with this Baba for 3 days. And when they leave, the Baba said, I afflict you with miracles. There's one of them. The law that God told him, he said, give 1 ear to men, give 1 ear to me. Every time the guy is walking, his hand is like this. Even when he's ministering, his hand, this ear is for angels. And he has kept it for more than 40 years. Every of the picture you see, his hand is like this. This ear belongs to God. This one belongs to men. And he was ministering somewhere, and he called the lady out. And you are over 40 and you are not yet married. And all the men that come say your chest is flat. Now go look at any lady, any size of breast you want. Call the person to come. And the lady went to the crowd, called somebody, said, go to the bathroom, collect her bra, wear it. When she wore the bra, as 2 of them were coming out, the horse scattered. The horse scattered. The listing in this world is manifestation. But every manifestation stands on a consecration. Somebody go into a bathroom, flat-chested, coming out later, it's as if he's carrying load on the chest. Because no prayer, nothing. Just with the talk, it happens. And I told myself, no. This life, we can't live it normally. I refuse distraction in my life. You know what God has been brooding in your heart for long. If you know what is good for you, go and start attending to it.